What's up? This is Dr. Taylor Krick at the Washington Wellness Center, and today's video is about intermittent fasting. And this one's not meant to be, everything there is to know about intermittent fasting. I'm going to try to keep it quick. This is really going to be used for my patients who I want to talk to about intermittent fasting. I'm going to say, hey, go watch this video next time we're going to talk about this. I think that a better name for intermittent fasting is the name that's often used in the scientific literature, which is time-restricted feeding. Because if you are starting to eat at 10 a.m. and you're stopping at 8 p.m., so you're doing a 10-hour feeding window and a 14-hour fasting window, that's what you're doing, is restricting your feeding based on time. It just so happens that the other amount of time, the other half of the day, is spent fasting. So you're intermittently fasting, but you're restricting your feeding based on time. So this is really, really popular. I don't need to reinvent the wheel with this video. There's lots and lots of information on it. We've taught this for years, and I've got old webinars and different things on this, and really nothing's changed, so it's really cool. But that it's just a really, really popular thing, and we've seen amazing results from it. So really quickly, a background: what are some types of fasting? So fasting is gaining popularity again, but what are some different types? So daily intermittent fasting, that's what this video is completely about. Block fasting is maybe going like 4 days. 4 days would be a block, or 2 days would be a block. Extended fasting, I would call anything maybe beyond 3 or 4 days, or going for a longer period of time. People have done that. My longest patient is 28 days. I've had that happen twice. And so, yeah, that's extended fasting. Dry fasting has gained popularity recently. I have not caught on to it yet, but it's exactly like it sounds, of no water, no food. Juice fasting was popular, more like 10 years ago. The documentary Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead was really popular, and people got great results from juice fasting. Now, fasting is fasting, it's great, but part of the benefits that they're finding from fasting are the blood sugar benefits. So when you're doing juice fasting, you're not getting those benefits, but you're still getting a lot of other benefits. So I think it's still a really good thing. Bone broth fasting has become really popular. Bone broth has a lot of glutamine in it. It's really good for a leaky gut. So different things that you can do during your fast. But what we're talking about right now is just daily intermittent fasting. So not adding anything in, just time restricted feeding, just stopping eating at a certain time and then starting at a certain time the next day, and trying to make that window tighter and tighter so that your fasting window gets longer and longer. So science is now rediscovering the benefits of not eating. And in fact, the science behind this is really, really cool. There's a ton of it. So the Nobel Prize was won in 2016 for a concept called autophagy. And what that means is that auto means self and phagy means eat. And it means that during times of fasting especially, the body goes through and it eats up bad cells. And literally, it kind of looks like Pac-Man. The body goes through and it eats up these bad cells. So those could be precancerous cells. Those could be rogue immune cells. Those could be inflammatory cells. Those could be circulating immune complexes that are just creating inflammation. Anything. They could be old, dead skin cells and tissue cells and different things, but the body goes through and it cleans them up. That process is called autophagy, and fasting induces autophagy. There are studies that show that the human growth hormone is increased in a daily intermittent fast by over 1,000%. It's something like 1,300% in men, I want to say, and maybe 900% in women. In one particular study, showed that just fasting one day for one intermittent fasting block did that to human growth hormone. Human growth hormone is muscle building, it's fat burning, it's anti-aging, so it's something that of course we all want. But daily intermittent fasting or practicing a time-restricted feeding model could potentially help you lose weight. There's thousands and thousands of stories of people losing weight. It does that by improving metabolism. It can improve sleep because it's a circadian mechanism. It can improve hormone balance, and it can improve inflammation. So it's a really, really great thing for somebody to try. So some of the options for your fasting window. And what that means is that if you're going to fast for 14 hours of the day, then obviously you're not fasting for 10 hours of the day. And so what you need to figure out is your window that's going to work with your schedule and also going to work with your body. So there's 3 examples down here. In general, this is a gross generalization, so everybody's different. In general, women do better with a shorter fasting period. Men tend to do better with a longer fasting period. I had somebody come up to me at church last Sunday, actually. He said, I'm doing a 20 and 4. I said, whoa, that's pretty good. 20 hours fasting a day, only eating 4 hours a day. That's kind of getting close to the OMAD diet, the 1 meal a day diet. But in general, a 14-hour fasting window is great for women. If you're doing a 12 and 12, to me, that is not intermittent fasting. That's just living. If you eat breakfast at 8 a.m. and you finish dinner at 8 p.m. and then you stop, that's not fasting. That's just a normal day. You're eating the entire day. I mean, that's not a whole lot of break for your body. So I think at 14 hours, it starts to make a difference. But let's give some examples if you're going to do a 14-hour fasting window. That means you're doing a 10-hour feeding window. So let's say you eat breakfast at 10 a.m. and then you stop at 8 p.m. and that's your feeding window. Or let's say, and that would mean that your fasting window on here, you're fasting from 8 p.m., you stop eating, you don't eat again until the next morning, 14 hours later at 10. So you maybe push your breakfast back a little bit, and that's worth mentioning real quick. Breakfast, we think about it as like, 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. It's whatever time you want to break your fast, because that's exactly what it means. That's literally the word. So you could break your fast at noon, and that's your breakfast. It's just your first meal of the day. So 10 to 8 for a feeding window, that works with a lot of people's schedules. Or maybe your schedule works better. You want to eat breakfast right away, but you're going to stop eating sooner in the day. So maybe it's more like an 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then after 6, no more food. You're now fasting for the night. Let's say you want to experiment with a 16-hour fasting window, which would mean that you have an 8-hour feeding window. I'd say that on average, this is a great place to be. Then sometimes throwing in a 14 for women maybe, sometimes throwing in more of an 18 for men, sometimes throwing in maybe even longer for both genders, maybe throwing in, and we're going to talk in a second about some ways to vary this, but a 16-8 is probably the most popular. So that might be eating breakfast at 10 a.m. and then stopping by 6 p.m. So you're going from 6 p.m. until 10 the next morning fasted. You're fasting for 16 hours. You could also do, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's the same thing. Or you could do like noon. Some people just skip breakfast and they wait all morning, and lunch is their first meal. Lunch is their break fast. So at noon they eat. Then when they get home at night, they maybe eat something after dinner. And then at 8 p.m. they say, ding, 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 okay, no more eating. That'd be a 16-hour fasting window. Or the last one, and you guys get this, it makes sense, but 18 hours, that would be a 6-hour feeding window. So going from noon to 6 would be one option. Going from 6 and then 6 p.m. to noon the next day would be another option. Another option would be eating breakfast at 9 a.m. and stopping eating at 3 p.m. It would be the exact same thing. You're fasting for 18 hours of the day, which means that you're eating for 6 hours of the day. So here's what you can do is you can try this. You can try it every day of the week. You can just push your breakfast back. You can stop having a snack after dinner, no glass of wine, no juice, no milk. We're not milk fans, but nothing after dinner, no calories after dinner, and just try it. And it's something that you might have amazing results right off the bat. But here's a rule that we love to implement. So for how does this work in my actual life? Oh, I wish this Wednesday would have been right. But the 5-1-1 rule, what that means is 5 days a week of following a schedule like we just talked about, of maybe a 16-8 or maybe a 14-10 intermittent fasting type schedule. Then 1 day a week of full-on fasting. What we'll usually recommend for this is to go dinner to dinner. So you're not going all day Wednesday without eating. You're just going all day until dinner, and you haven't eaten since Tuesday's dinner. So a full day of fasting is really, really beneficial. Sometimes people need to work their way up to that. They aren't ready to go a full day without eating. So they can just start by pushing their breakfast back a little bit and by pushing their dinner up a little bit and slowly get to that point where they can go longer and longer. But one day a week of full fasting and then one day a week of feasting. And the feasting day is the most important for metabolism, for weight loss. It is the most important because it reminds your body that it's not starving. When your body thinks that it's starving, it gets thrifty. It holds on to fat. It's not going to want to burn it. It's not going to want to lose it as quickly. So you want to remind your body that it's not starving. So how does this typically look throughout the week? Well, maybe on Sunday it's an intermittent fast. Maybe you don't eat a breakfast right away. Maybe you go to church. Maybe you do whatever you do on Sunday, and then you don't eat till you get home, and then it's more of a big brunch or a big lunch or whatever you do. But intermittent fast, Monday intermittent fast, Tuesday intermittent fast, Wednesday full fast. And this is just an example. You could do that on Tuesday. You could do that on Monday. You could do that any day of the week. I wouldn't suggest putting your fast day and your feast day right next to each other, but you totally could. Monday would be a good fast day if you've had a rough weekend, or you've been on vacation and you went out of town for the weekend, or you went out with friends and you had some drinks or something. And you're like, oh, I want to fast on Monday to kind of kickstart myself back into this. You can play around with this. But then on Saturday's almost always the feast day. But then on Saturday, you feast. Now, there are some other variations in this. You could do a 4-2-1, which would be more like 2 days of feasting and 1 day of fasting and 4 days of intermittent. And that might be better for somebody with the thyroid issue. You don't want to reduce calories too often with somebody with low thyroid because it's going to slow down their metabolism, and you want to give enough calories so that their thyroid doesn't slow down. Could also be useful maybe within a woman's cycle. As you get closer to the time of a menstrual cycle, you can do more high carb days and more feasting days. That's really, really good. Then after the menstrual cycle, then you maybe go back to more of a fasting or more of a restrictive schedule. So anyway, I hope that gives some ideas and some suggestions of how to actually implement this and the principles behind it. Intermittent fasting just means going longer without eating. Time-restricted feeding is a better name for it, because you're just going to put some rules on yourself, like I don't eat before 10 a.m. and I don't eat after 6 p.m. And then all of a sudden you're doing a 14-8, 16-8. The math is tough. You're doing a 16-8 intermittent fasting, but during that time you're eating the same amount of calories. You don't want to eat less. You just want to eat less often. So if you're doing 1,500 calories before right now, you still want to do 1,500 calories on this intermittent fasting schedule, or 1,800 or whatever you're at. You don't want to eat less. You want to eat less often. So if you're somebody who's never tried this, just start pushing your breakfast back an hour or 2 hours, and start pushing your dinner up a little bit. And then when dinner's over, just don't eat anymore. If you're somebody who's already done the intermittent fasting, try the 5-1-1 rule. If you're somebody who's just starting from scratch, then just make a plan and try it, and it's going to get easier and easier and easier, and eventually you're going to get to the point where you can go a full day without eating and feel pretty good. And that's a really, really good sign just for your blood sugar control and your metabolism, that you can go longer without eating. But at the same time, those feast days are really, really important, because you want to remind your body that it's not starving.